It was the year 1828 in the quiet English village of Polstead, Suffolk, when Mrs. Marten awoke from a chilling dream. In her restless slumber, a shadowy figure emerged, pointing to a place on the earth. It was the ghost of her missing stepdaughter Maria, and the spot she pointed to, the notorious Red Barn. Heart pounding, Mrs. Marten stirred her husband, Maria's father, urging him to go to the Red Barn and dig where their daughter's specter had indicated. Reluctantly, he took up a shovel and made his way to the barn, the cold night air thick with foreboding. Digging near one of the grain bins, he unearthed a sack. Inside, the decomposing remains of Maria lay twisted, her lifeless body still identifiable by her hair and tattered clothing. The village inquest was swift. Maria had been murdered. Suspicion fell upon William Corder, Maria's would-be suitor, a man with a reputation as slippery as his smile. Known for his charm, Corder had been a schemer since his youth, earning the nickname Foxy for his cunning ways. He had left a trail of scandal in his wake, from forgery to thievery, and was even banished to London to escape disgrace. But fate brought him back to Polstead, and it was here, surrounded by death and misfortune, that he crossed paths with Maria. The Corders had recently suffered great tragedy. William Corder, the sole surviving son, had lost his father and brothers within the span of a year. Once known as a petty thief and fraudster, William unexpectedly inherited the family's vast farming property, transforming him from a miscreant into a man of considerable means. Among his inherited land stood the Red Barn, an ominous and distinctive structure that loomed large over the landscape, known to all who passed by. Then there were the Martens. Thomas Marten, a mole catcher by trade, made his living exterminating pests for local farmers. He lived with his second wife, Anne, and his children from his first marriage, including the beautiful Maria. By her mid-20s, Maria Marten, beautiful yet troubled, had borne 2 children from previous relationships. One child's father was none other than Corder's own brother, though the infant had died in its infancy. When Maria discovered she was again pregnant, this time with Corder's child, he promised to marry her. But behind his hollow words, a sinister plot brewed. In 1826, Maria, then 24, began a relationship with the 22-year-old William Corder. The young couple soon had a child of their own, but fate dealt them another cruel blow. The baby was frail and sickly, and within a month, the tiny life was snuffed out. This loss would mark the beginning of a dark chapter for both families, as secrets, lies, and death would soon follow in the shadow of the Red Barn. Corder and Maria had indeed planned to marry, but shadows of deceit had already begun to creep into their story. Corder arrived one fateful day with troubling news, though never proven. He claimed a warrant had been issued for Maria's arrest, a consequence of the unforgivable crime of having a child out of wedlock. With urgency in his voice, he presented a plan to the Marten family on May 18, 1827. The pair would elope, he declared. To avoid detection, Maria would dress in men's clothing, a disguise that would help her slip away unnoticed. They would take separate routes. Corder, armed with 2 loaded pistols, would lead the way to the Red Barn, that half-mile landmark standing grim against the sky. There, under the cloak of night, they would reunite and make their way to Ipswich, 15 miles away, where they would be married by the next day. But days passed, and Maria never returned. Corder, however, reappeared at the Marten household with unsettling regularity, offering vague excuses, delays with the marriage license, unexpected complications that required Maria to remain in Ipswich. His visits stretched across weeks, each explanation more hollow than the last. Soon, his stories shifted to tales of a secret wedding and Maria's absence being due to her delicate condition. Yet, as the days turned to weeks, the villagers grew suspicious. Letters from Corder arrived, filled with excuses about illnesses, lost letters, and injured hands, but they all rang hollow. All the while, Corder was living a double life, remarried in London to Mary Moore and running a boarding house with her, while Maria remained nowhere to be found. The Marten family's unease deepened with every passing day, but the truth, as it would soon be revealed, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. By the close of 1827, Corder sent letters to the Marten family from London, claiming that he and Maria had finally married and settled into a happy new life. His letters painted a picture of contentment, always speaking of Maria's joy, their newfound bliss together. But those comforting words would soon unravel into something far more sinister. In April of 1828, Maria's stepmother, Anne Marten, confided in her husband with an unsettling revelation. She suggested he go to the Red Barn and examine it. When Thomas, puzzled by the request, asked why, Anne replied with a voice that trembled with unease, "I have very frequently dreamed about Maria, and twice before Christmas, I dreamed that Maria was murdered and buried in the Red Barn." Thomas was shocked not only by the nature of the dreams, but by the fact that Anne had kept them secret for so long. When he pressed her as to why she hadn't spoken of them earlier, she confessed her fear of being dismissed as superstitious, knowing how much her husband disapproved of such things. But the dreams haunted her, gnawing at her conscience until she could no longer remain silent. Anne was resolute something was terribly wrong. On April 19th, Thomas, accompanied by a trusted friend, set off to the Red Barn, the location now fraught with an ominous tension. Inside, they began to clear away the layers of straw that blanketed the floor. Against the back wall, they found a patch where the earth appeared disturbed, the soil too freshly turned for such an isolated place. They began to dig. It is beyond words to describe the horror that overcame Thomas Marten when, beneath the cold ground, he uncovered the remains of his beloved daughter. The anguish of that discovery, flesh decayed, hair matted, yet still recognizable as Maria would haunt him forever. The police swiftly took over the grim investigation, uncovering the brutal nature of Maria's murder. Among the evidence, they found a handkerchief near her body, which Anne Marten, with trembling certainty, identified as belonging to William Corder. It was not long before word of Anne's prophetic dream spread, with many hailing it as a miracle, a ghostly intervention in which Maria herself had reached out from beyond the grave to reveal the truth of her own violent end. The hunt for Corder was swift and decisive. Investigators tracked him down to London just 4 days later, where he was living under an assumed identity, trying to deny everything, but evidence spoke louder than his words. Pistols linked to the murder, a passport suggesting he was ready to flee to France, it all pointed to guilt. His arrest sent shockwaves through the country, but the story of Maria's ghost, her dreams, her restless spirit guiding the living, captivated the imagination of all England. In the weeks that followed, the tale of the Red Barn murder spread like wildfire. Ballads were sung in taverns, plays were performed on makeshift stages, poems penned in the dark corners of crowded rooms, and puppet shows recreated the grisly scene of Maria's death for curious onlookers. By the time Corder's trial commenced on August 7th, 1828, the case had become a national obsession. London's hotels were filled to capacity, with reports that rooms had been fully booked 2 weeks prior to the trial's start. At his trial, the atmosphere was electric with morbid curiosity. Crowds jostled for tickets, eager to witness the downfall of the Red Barn murderer. Corder, cool and calculating, pleaded not guilty. Yet Maria's stepmother, Mrs. Marten, took the stand, recounting her eerie dreams of Maria's ghost. Her husband testified to the discovery of the body, while a local boy remembered seeing Corder near the barn, a pickaxe in hand. The jury deliberated for only 35 minutes. Guilty. On August 11th, Corder faced the gallows, his fate sealed. Between 7 and 20,000 spectators gathered to witness the execution of the man who had captivated a nation with his heinous crime. As Corder stood on the gallows, a crowd of thousands gathered to witness his execution. Moments before the hood covered his face, he confessed, one last time, "I am guilty. My sentence is just." As the rope tightened around his neck, many believed that justice had been served not just by the courts, but by the restless spirit of Maria Marten herself, who had returned from death to ensure her murderer paid the ultimate price. Even in death, Corder's body did not rest. His corpse was publicly displayed, dissected for scientific study. Crowds gawked at the gruesome sight, while morbid souvenirs, pieces of rope, locks of Maria's hair were sold to eager collectors. The Red Barn became a macabre pilgrimage site, stripped bare by souvenir hunters. 14 years after the tragic events, the Red Barn met its own fiery end. Flames consumed the structure, and its smoke curled ominously into the sky, visible even from the Marten home. With the barn's destruction, it seemed the final chapter of the infamous tale had been written. But while the fire extinguished one relic of the past, another endured. The Marten home, slightly expanded and modernized, still stands today, nestled in its familiar greenery, now listed in the UK's National Archives as a historic site. The tale of Maria Marten and William Corder became the stuff of legend, woven into Victorian plays, fairground spectacles, and whispered stories, yet doubts lingered. Was it truly a ghost that guided Mrs. Marten to the body? Or did she know more than she let on? Dark rumors of an affair between Anne Marten and Corder swirled. Could Anne herself have played a darker role in Maria's demise? Evidence surfaced during William Corder's trial, suggesting that Anne and Corder had been having an affair. This illicit relationship had allegedly been ongoing for some time, both before and after Maria's death. If true, it could explain why Corder lingered in Polstead for months before finally fleeing to London. Known to a few and suspected by others, their affair became a tantalizing piece of the trial's grim puzzle. And although married to Maria's father, was only a year older than Maria herself. The contrast between her dreary, aging husband, a mole catcher by trade, and the youthful, handsome Corder, newly elevated by his inheritance, might have made her susceptible to Corder's charms. Whether she was complicit in Maria's death or merely an opportunist who later sought to distance herself from the crime, it's possible Anne saw a chance to rid herself of a romantic rival by revealing Maria's body nearly a year after the murder. Though no definitive proof survives, this theory casts a shadow of doubt over Anne's role in the tragedy. Could she have been part of a premeditated plan to remove Maria, clearing the path for her and Corder's affair to continue? Corder, as reported by several witnesses, was growing increasingly frustrated with Maria's pressure to wed. It's easy to imagine that, faced with a child on the way and Maria's persistent demands, he may have seen violence as his only way. The gruesome state of Maria's body suggested a chilling sequence of events. Doctors who examined her remains concluded that she had first been strangled, her neck bound by Corder's handkerchief. The violence didn't stop there. Maria had been shot in the face, and her body bore multiple stab wounds, including savage cuts to her eye, neck, and chest. It was clear that her death had been brutal, but the precise details of what happened in that dark red barn, and who else might have been involved, will forever remain a mystery lost to time. It's quite probable that William Corder's lingering presence in Polstead was less about indecision and more about maintaining his affair with Anne Marten. After all, once he finally moved to London, one of his first actions was to pen several letters to the Marten family, spinning elaborate lies about a blissful wedding he and Maria had supposedly shared. Yet, while weaving this fiction, Corder was also crafting another story, one intended to hide his identity, as he placed a personal ad in a London paper. The ad, which ran on November 13th and again on November 25th, sought a new companion. It worked. Among the dozens of responses to his ad, many of which were later read aloud in court, a young woman named Mary Moore immediately caught his interest. The connection was so swift that Corder may not have even needed to run the second ad. London records indicate that a William Corder and a Mary Moore were married just 2 days later, on November 27th, although discrepancies in the birth year listed for Corder leave some room for doubt about whether this is the exact record. Regardless, by the time he was writing letters home to the Martens about his supposed happiness with Maria, Corder had already married Mary Moore. But gossip has a way of catching up, and by April of 1828, the truth began to unravel. Word of Corder's new marriage reached Polstead, and coincidentally, or perhaps not, this is when Anne Marten began experiencing her infamous dreams. Dreams in which Maria appeared to her, revealing the location of her own murder. Was Anne merely a jilted lover, seeking revenge by pointing the finger at Corder when she realized she had been discarded? It's a theory that's hardly new. Even before Corder's trial, there were whispers in the village, speculating that Anne's dream may have had a more earthly origin. After all, she had every reason to want Corder exposed, especially after learning of his secret marriage. And yet, it's Anne's claim of a ghostly visitation that endures in popular retellings of the story today. So, did Maria truly come to her grieving stepmother in a dream, guiding her to the site of her tragic death? Or is the story simply a convenient fabrication born from jealousy and betrayal? When a ghost story feels too perfectly constructed, too much like fiction, it's wise to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, even when it's rooted in real historical events. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and love true crime and horror stories, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more chilling stories just like this one. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay haunted.